Good morning and happy Father's Day to all of our wonderful fathers out there. I'm glad you joined me today. I'm Dr. Susan. We are here with Play and Learn. And today, since it's Father's Day, I wanted to do something that we might be able to do for our dads on this special day. And if you happen to watch this when it isn't actually Father's Day, it's still a fun way to give something back to Dad. So what we're going to do with the story we're going to look at today is called Stone Soup. And we're going to just read the story, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of back information about the story as we go along with what we're going to create this morning. All right? So we're going to listen to a story. It's called Stone Soup, and it is by Anne McGovern, and the pictures are by Penny Peels. So that's the name of the story and who the author is. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that, and then we will get into the activity that goes along with what the story tells us today. All right? So enjoy the story. All right. A young man was walking. He walked and he walked and he walked all night and he walked all day. He was tired. And he was hungry. You can kind of see that from the picture. At last he came to a big house. What a fine house, he said. There will be plenty of food for me here. He knocked on the door. A little old lady opened it. Good lady, said the young man, I am very hungry. Can you give me something to eat? She says, I have nothing to give you, said the little old lady. I have nothing in this house. I have nothing in the garden. And she began to close the door. Stop, said the young man. If you will not give me something to eat, will you give me a stone? That's a funny request. A stone, said the little old lady. What will you do with the stone? You cannot eat a stone. Ah, said the young man. I can make soup from a stone. Now, the little old lady had never heard that before. Make soup from a stone? Fancy that! There are stones in the road, said the little old lady. The young man picked up a round gray stone. This stone will make some wonderful soup, he said. Now, can you give me a pot? The little old lady got a pot. She filled the pot with water and put it on the fire. Put it on the fire, said the young man. The little old lady did just as she was told, and soon the water was bubbling in the pot. The young man had put the round gray stone into the pot. Now we will wait for the stone to cook into soup, he said. The pot bubbled and bubbled. After a while, the little old lady said, This soup is cooking fast. It is cooking fast now, said the hungry young man, but it will cook faster with some onions. So the little old lady went to the garden to get some yellow onions. Into the pot went the yellow onions with a round gray stone. Soup from a stone, said the little old lady. Fancy that. The pot bubbled and bubbled. After a while, the little old lady said, This soup smells good. It smells good now, said the hungry young man, but it would smell better with some carrots. So the little old lady went out to the garden and she pulled up some carrots, all the carrots she could carry. Into the pot, the long, thin carrots with the yellow onions and the round gray stone. Soup from a stone, said the little old lady. Fancy that. And the pot bubbled and bubbled. After a while, the little old lady said, This soup tastes good. It tastes good now, said the hungry young man, but it would taste much better with beef bones. So the little old lady went to get some juicy beef bones. Into the pot went the juicy beef bones, the long, thin carrots, the yellow onions, and the round gray stone. Soup from a stone, said the little old lady. Fancy that. The pot bubbled and bubbled. After a while, the little old lady said, This soup is fit for a prince. It is fit for a prince now, said the hungry young man, but it would be fit for a king with a bit of salt and a handful of pepper and salt. So the little old lady got the pepper and the salt. Into the pot went the bit of pepper and a handful of salt, with the juicy beef bones and the long thin carrots and the yellow onions and the round gray stone. Soup from a stone, said the little old lady. Fancy that. The pot bubbled and bubbled. After a while, the little old lady said, "This soup is too thin." "It's too thin now," said the hungry young man, "but it would be nice and thick with some butter and barley." So the little old lady went to get butter and barley. Into the pot went the butter and barley and bits of pepper and a handful of salt, juicy beef bones and some long thin carrots and some yellow onions, and of course the round gray stone. So she's making soup from a stone, said the little old lady. Fancy that. The pot bubbled and bubbled. After a while, the little old lady tasted the soup again. "This soup is good," she said. "Yes," said the hungry young man. "This soup is fit for a king, and now we will eat." "Stop," said the little old lady. "This soup is indeed fit for a king. Now I will set a table fit for a king." So she took out her best tablecloth and her best dishes. The little old lady and the hungry young man ate all the soup. The soup made with butter and barley and a bit of pepper and a handful of salt and juicy beef bones and the long thin carrots and the yellow onions and the round gray stone. "Soup from a stone," said the little old lady. "Fancy that." "Now I must be on my way," said the young man, and he took the stone out of the pot and put it back into his pocket. "Why are you taking the stone?" said the little old lady. "Well," said the young man, "the stone is not cooked enough. I will have to cook it some more tomorrow." And the young man said goodbye. He walked down the road, and he walked and he walked. "What a fine supper I will have tomorrow," he said to himself. "Soup from a stone. Fancy that." All right. So, did you ever imagine you could make soup from a stone? Well, I think you probably, I'll tell you a little bit about the background on the story itself that I learned when I was doing some research on it. And, but yes, I imagine that he thought this was a really good idea to see if he could get the lady to help him have some food. So this was one of his ways that he thought about doing it. So the story was written, actually it was a folk tale that was told in France. That's where the original idea started from. And I want you to think about the part of the idea. And it started then. And that started in 1732. And if you go to today's date, 220, that was 288 years ago that the person, we don't know who that person is, thought of this folktale. And while I was researching this, because I thought it was interesting, and I was trying to find a little bit more information about the author, and when I looked on Amazon, I just put in stone soup, and I got 4 different books, 4 different versions of this story. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. It's interesting to the fact that in the time the story was originally told, it got to England in 1786 is when it got to England. I think that's the year. When that story, going from person to person to person to person, it wasn't written in book form as yet. And when it got to England, they added 2 travelers and a whole town, not just one man and one lady. So the story got embellished a little bit more. And I'm not even sure, because I couldn't find the original story written down anywhere that was done in the first time. So as the story came to the United States, which was in 1803, which was when it first got to to when someone created it into a book, which I thought was very interesting. And this story was with, this one wasn't done in 1803, this particular author. But when that story got here, it was still the two travelers and the town. But now, with this particular author, she decided, well, I'm going to be creative. I'm going to do something a little bit different. And she started with just the little old lady and the young man. That's what she decided to write about. And the reason I wanted to share this with you is how old the story is. And it went from mouth to mouth to mouth to mouth in storytelling, because it was a folk tale, and it wasn't written down anywhere. Somebody heard it, then they told it to a group of people. Somebody heard that, they told it to a group of people, and it went on and on and on until it got to England. And then it came all the way over to the United States in 1803. So when it got here, and a little while later, then it got put into book form. And all these other books that I looked at, it was the two travelers. So this particular lady decided she would have the characters different. So one of the things to remember is when you hear an idea, and the idea sounds good, it's a good basis. If you want to take that idea, embellish on it, change it, you can do that and make it your own. So that's kind of the story about how the story got to the United States. So what we're going to do now is to create something that you might be able to do for your father today, which is Father's Day. But a little later, if you don't happen to watch this today, you can do it for Dad later, or Mom, whichever you want to do. But we're going to make the soup, sorta. Get the sorta part, because I don't have a stove sitting on the stage, so I can't use the stove, and I don't have some of the other ingredients that they talked about due to the fact that it's not here at the center. So we're going to improvise just a little bit. So the first thing that we're going to do is we need the stone. Well, I didn't have a stone, but we do have some little pebbles and things here. So I put some in a bag. I'm just going to show you those so you can see that. This is all about the creating out of what we have, using what we have. So there's a leaf. So there's the stones. And I'm sure isn't probably a good idea if you were using this for actual soup to have leaves and things like that on your stone. So anyway, we're going to put these stones in this bag, and we're going to make it airtight, because we are going to create things that will make a soup. But because the stones aren't clean, for one thing, and we wouldn't want to put that in a soup where people would be eating it. So I'm just putting it in the plastic bag, and then I'm going to cover it with foil. And we're not actually going to cook this soup right now. I will do that when I get home. And but this is just for the story, so you can get an idea. So you can imagine this as being the stone. So I have water, and we're going to put water in the pot. So we'll put, like she did, she put water in that pot, and you notice that they didn't have a stove. They had a big fireplace, and the fireplace had the wood underneath it, and that was where they did their cooking. They didn't have stoves at that particular time when the story was originally thought about and told, because that was a very long time ago. Maybe if you're interested, you can look up 288 years ago and see what kind of cooking devices they had at that particular point in time, which would give you an idea. Now, there's that, and we're going to put the stone in there. So we're going to sit that in here. So that's just going to go in the pot. I think you can see this. There you go. So it's going to go in the pot. And because we don't have a stove in here, we're going to kind of create one. We're going to have an imaginary stove. So we're going to make fire, because you need fire in order to cook the soup, right? So I took yellow pieces of paper. I'm going to put it right here so you can see. And cut out like flame kind of things. So we'll just kind of put flame on the end here, all right? So this is just kind of our fairy tale come to life, or folk tale. So we're going to add a little bit more color here. But I thought it was really interesting that the history of the story and how very long ago it was originated. So we're going to add the flame right here. There's our flame. Okay. So now we're going to put the pot on the fire. So this is our fire. This is kind we don't need pot holders for. Okay, so here's our fire. I'll put this right in the middle so that you guys can see that. So there's the pot. It's on the flame. There we go. So it's starting to boil. Okay? So we're going to let it, we're going to imagine that the water is boiling. And I brought things that we're going to actually put into the pot that we would normally put in a bowl of soup or put in a pot of soup. The first thing he talked about the soup would taste so much better if it had onions. Now I wanted to tell you a little bit about each of these ingredients, not necessarily from a point of view from the food nutrition and things like that, but this is the emotional nutrition or the social nutrition that you would get from making a pot of soup, which is why I thought it might be kind of cool to do that for Dad today, is to maybe ask Mom if you guys could make your dad some soup. So first thing is she talked about the onion. Now an onion, I'm sure everybody's seen an onion, but an onion has lots of layers to it. This is just the peel on the outside, so we're going to pull that away, and we're going to actually get to the onion. And there's the first layer. And I'm actually going to prep this like we're going to actually cook this soup, okay? So we're going to take the peel off. That's not very tasty. And it doesn't add a whole lot of flavor. So we're going to peel down this. Now what I'm actually peeling is you can see, let's see, I'm going to move our pot over here so you can actually see what I'm doing. Is I'm pulling off the first layer of the onion. And this is a good picture here of it. Onions have lots and lots of layers. And how I thought an onion related to our story and how it relates to our being social with our family and also our friends is the onion, as I said, has many layers. And we also have many layers. Our layers are built from our family. And probably, if you talk to your mom and your dad, probably you'll find that your family has a very long history too, of where your family originally came to the United States and what your social or cultural history is. So I'm going to cut the onion. You can see that there. Now, I think you can see, but you can see all these little rings in the onions. So there's a whole bunch of little rings until you get to the core of it. All right? Well, if you think about this as your family, you figure you have yourself and your mom and your dad, your sisters and your brothers. When you think of your grandparents or your aunts and uncles that have their husbands and their family and their children, and then you think of your grandparents and their parents, and their parents, and their parents, and it goes on and on and on. And the onion is kind of a picture of that. That is one of the ways in which we find who we are, what we think, what our values are, and things like that. Then we learn that from our family. So I'm going to just cut a few pieces of the onion. You don't have to cut really, really tiny ones. So I'm just going to cut these like that. And it's very tear-jerking onion. So, sorry for the noise. Okay, so we're going to put these in the soup. So there's the onion. And that's what he was talking about, because onion, has a sweet flavor. And so we're going to add more of these. Now what I was thinking is that it might be fun to do a soup, and these are going to make my eyes water, to do the soup for your family for today. Or actually you could do it any day. It doesn't have to be just today. Okay, so we're going to put the soup in there. So the onions are going, and we know a little bit about onions. It has layers, and our family has layers, and we have layers The layers we have are from our experiences and stuff. So the next thing he said that they put in there was carrots. So I got carrots, except I went the short route, and I got the carrots that are already peeled. Excuse me, I have to throw away the trash. That are already peeled, and we're just going to slice those up to their smaller pieces. But the carrots, and what does a carrot do or mean with our families or our culture? Well, carrots are sweet, and they sweeten the salad, they sweeten all kinds of things. So how I put that in our family is how the sweet part of who we are, where did that come from? How did we get that? Were we just born with it? Or was it from what our parents taught us, the things we learned when we were small, and we went ahead and those are the things that we remember, and that's the things that how we act and a lot of times how we think. So we're going to add some sweetness to there, just as you and your brothers and your sisters, I didn't say this was going to be neat, your brothers and sisters and your mom and dad and your aunts and uncles and everybody down the line, how they added sweetness to your life. And then how you learn to add your own sweetness. And that's on what makes your day happy and what makes your day exciting and things of that nature. And because when you start with that, you start with how the experiences that you have. And we're going to talk about that with a different ingredient. So there's our beginning of our carrots. Now he didn't have in his soup, because I guess she didn't have in her garden, she didn't have potatoes. But we have potatoes. So we're going to add potatoes, because I know dads like potatoes, and most kids like potatoes. So we're going to add these little brown potatoes. And if you're interested in potatoes, you might want to have mom or dad help you look up the history of potatoes, where they originally came from, and what kind of it's a root vegetable. Okay? So potatoes are starchy, and they're also filling. So starch helps things stick together, and it helps thicken things. So how could starch show up in our day-to-day life? How would that be? What thickens things in your family? What makes your family feel close together and loving and the fun and the excitement that you have as your family and the things you do? So we're going to add our potatoes. Well, part of that is by our interactions with our families, and not only our immediate family, but our extended family too, which is your cousins and aunts and uncles and things of that nature. But that's the part where we share food, we share meals, we share time together, and we share just being who we are. And the more of those experiences, the stronger or the thicker our relationship becomes with our family. So that's the starch and things from potatoes. So we're going to add that. And I'm hoping that maybe you guys will do this where you're not with the stones, but be able to create something your whole family can help make. You know, you do it as a family project, you know, in making your own soup. Sometimes families have soup that it's a family history, or it's a family favorite that went down from grandma and great-grandma and great-great-grandma and things like that. And that was handed down to the parents, usually the mom, from her family, and the dad. And that's called a family tradition or a family recipe. So then you could get that, and then maybe in experimenting with your family, you could think of a way to add something different to it to make it your particular family's tradition. So that would be another way you could do it. In the story, the way in which the young man talked the little old lady into having him come in and have soup with him, or to make soup, and the stone was the key to having him let him in so he could do this. So that was the beginning, even though she probably didn't feel that at the time, was the beginning of sharing and the beginning of a relationship between the two of them, because they did work together in creating the soup. He said what would be next, and she went ahead and got the ingredients, and they put the soup together. So he also didn't add celery, and this is another flavoring that you can add, and you can add the celery leaves, because celery is a seasoning. Not only just the celery itself in the soup, but it's the seasoning and the flavoring in the leaves. So we're going to add some celery leaves to our soup, okay? So we're going to put that in our soup. I think you can see this, yes. So we're going to add that. We're not going to add the stems, just the leaves. So we're going to add that. So she was saying barley. I didn't have any barley, so we're using celery leaves as in a replacement for that, all right? So we're going to add that. So, and then, because we have the celery, we want to keep the flavor going, so we're going to just cut some celery and add some celery to the soup. And I'm really sorry about this noise. It's the acrylic cutting board. Just think about it as music, okay? Cooking music. Maybe it's a drum clunking or something like that. You can always use that idea. Okay, so now we're going to add the celery to the soup. That's the seasoning that we're going to use, because I didn't have any barley. So it's called make do, and make what you can out of what you have. Then the next thing that he talked about is he talked about the salt and pepper. So if we take the idea of salt and pepper and we add that to our soup, salt and pepper also is seasoning, and it helps bring out flavor in the food that we're creating. So we're going to put the salt in she was talking about. He said a handful. I don't think we're going to put that much salt in there. So we're going to just add the salt. Now, salt and pepper is a seasoning. How do you think, or what do you think that would make out of in our family relationship? What do you think that would do? We're adding the pepper now. So there goes the pepper. So now we have pepper and we have salt. What do you think? Salt and pepper could be, at least in my thought process when I was thinking about this, salt and pepper can be the experiences that you have inside your family. When you have the traditions you have at Thanksgiving and at Christmas and your birthdays and things like that. Those are experiences, and those are things that add that special flavor to your life that makes it different just for you, because that's part of who you are, and that becomes part of your thought process and how you interact with other people. And it's all coming from a pot of soup, okay? So we have the soup. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about was the fact that the fire, if we didn't have a fire under our soup, we wouldn't get a soup. But what the fire does, it creates energy. The energy is what makes the cooking, and it cooks the vegetables and everything else through. So that cooking is what pulls it all together and adds all that togetherness and the oneness that this soup comes from, because everything that's in the soup is part of what your life is. They have the same stuff inside it as it is inside of you, each and every one of the people in your family. So the soup boils and the soup cooks, and then she did say cream. She said because the soup was very thin. Well, yeah, this is thin. So she added cream, and the cream came from the cow, so she had to go out and milk the cow and churn the butter, churn the butter so that she could get the cream, make cream. So she went out and she did that. So she added that, and that added the richness to it. What kind of things adds richness to your life? The times you have with your parents, the things that you do, and the activities that you have together as a family. Father's Day is made one of those families, but maybe your father isn't there with you right now. And like my grandson's father isn't there. He's in the service, and he's in Korea. So they can't have a Father's Day one-on-one. They talk on the phone, but they can't have that closeness right now. So we just kind of try to figure out how we could do that. And the boys actually made their dad a special present, and they gave it to him when they were doing FaceTime with him this morning. So that was how they did that. So they couldn't give him soup, so they'll just have to wait till he gets home before they can make soup for him. But it was still a way that they could connect with one another. Same thing with your grandparents. They're fathers too. They're your mom's father, your dad's father. So you could do that with them too. But the whole idea of the stone soup was that he was able to bring the sharing part of this lovely lady out so that they could share a meal together. And she thought the soup was so good, and it was such a fabulous idea, that she said this should be set for a king. So she was recognizing the wonder and the wonderfulness of this young man, and in the things that she gave also to the soup, because it took both of them to create this soup. So they sat down and they had a royal feast because she felt it was fit for a king. So she saw that greatness within herself, and she saw that greatness within this young man that were there, and they got to share the soup. And the best part about it is this story is so old, but it's still so important to anybody that reads it. It's not just a funny little story about how funny that is to make soup from a stone, right? From the title. Yet, it gave so much to the young man and to the lady. And can you think of all the people of the different countries that heard this story 288 years ago, and it's still here today. It's still here. It may have a different flavor to it. Maybe they added different ingredients to the soup, but it's a different flavor with the different ideas that the different authors added. One had 2 travelers in a whole town. And then there was just one young man and one old lady. So no matter what it is that you do, your traditions or anything else you do with your family or your friends or your community or the whole world, you make a difference, and your flavor is always added. So if you do make the soup for your dad, with your mom's help, have a wonderful time doing it. If you don't do it now, try to find time to do it later, or just make something together and serve with your family as a meal, because that's one of the ways in which we bond ourselves together. So you guys have a great rest of the day. Dads, have a happy Father's Day, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.